Hi, and welcome to show number 4 of the Cafecito Travel Talks, a podcast where people share travel stories and adventures. My name is Tony Lloyd, and I'm going to be your host. Each week, I sit down with travelers from different walks of life, and we talk about their journeys. Who are they? Where they're from? What? When and why did they decide to do this? But most importantly, how are they doing it? I'd like to thank the people who have been listening to our first shows, and I'd like to encourage everyone to subscribe to one of the podcast providers so that we have you automatically connected when the new shows come out. Unfortunately, the world is still facing Corona. Hopefully this will clear up soon. I'm hoping that these shows will help you distract your mind a little bit about the things that are going on and that we cannot unfortunately travel at the moment. And when we do start traveling, I'd like to invite you, as always, to the El Cafecito here in Cuenca, Ecuador, and to our restaurant across the plaza. And then I'm looking forward to when this whole thing clears up to hear some of the great stories that people have about where they are at this current moment. As we are a grassroots project, I'm still looking for your feedback, so please send us your feedbacks, your comments via email to elcafecitotraveltalks@gmail.com. For today's show, I have an engineer from London who decides to leave his desk in the busy city and pedals his way through South America. Without further ado, please get yourself a tea or a cup of coffee and enjoy today's show.
Casper is traveling on a pedal bike, from southern tip of South America all the way to the north. Before we get into your story, get a little bit more about the adventures, I'm sure there's got to be some along the way. Let's talk about what were you doing before?
I was living in the UK. I was working in London as an engineer, designing essentially environmentally friendly power stations, district heating networks, and CHP, if anyone knows what that is. It's a bit difficult to explain in bars and things. But yeah, I was pretty happily working in London. Sort of knocking on middle age, really. I'd had a fairly sort of sporty past, and sitting at a desk wasn't agreeing with me. And I just sort of saw a lot of people around me looking quite old and looking quite ill, and I thought, I've got no reason to be at this desk. I've got certainly sort of the security to be able to go and do what I want. I'd done some sort of similar stuff in the past, I think in China and Kazakhstan, but not anywhere as fun as here, I think. I'd always had a bit of a soft spot for South America in general.
Explain to us a little bit about, so you're at the office and this thoughts are going through your mind. When do you make decisions? Do you remember the moment? Okay.
Absolutely, and I imagine probably most people have a sort of epiphany moment. Yeah, I had been in work on a Sunday, working on a project that I had no hope of finishing, and I was cycling home. Yeah, I just sort of thought to myself, no, I've got to make a change. The break.
Okay, you're cycling home.
Yeah.
You're saying, okay, now I've got to make this break. What were some of your first steps? Walk us through that.
Yeah, fair enough. First thing I thought was, strange for a 35-year-old person to do, but is my family going to be okay?
I think it's normal.
Okay. And so sort of clearing it with them. And so I gave my mum a call when I got back, explained to her that I'd been having fun at work, and I wanted to, in fact, no, I didn't even mention the travelling at that because I didn't want to make it look like it was more pull than push. And she, really supportive, got a great family. So does my sister. Like, they had no problems with me going away to South America. They know I can look after myself. And so they were like, yeah, do it, but don't run away from anything. Make sure that you sort out your stuff before you leave.
Okay. And was there anyone that was like, what are you doing?
No, not really. In fact, I think another friend of mine, I think there's a sort of 35-year-old itch that you get, because another friend of mine had been thinking the same. He's really successful and he always has his stuff all locked down. He had just sort of reached out thing, and so he's my best mate, and we went to the pub. I sort of said, hey, I'm thinking about disappearing for a year, and he was of course he's supportive, because when you're a friend, you have no sort of skin in the game. When you're a relative, they're slightly, it's not to say that they're more worried for you, but they've got a longer term interest, like making sure you've got a successful career or anything like that, whereas your friends will all just say, screw it, go. It's like, they'll always give you the advice that is the most sort of reckless or whatever. If it's like, should I talk to that girl? They'll always say yes, because they don't suffer the embarrassment or, the downside if it goes wrong. They only hear the upside if it goes well. I'm not saying, he doesn't care. I'm just saying that.
Because he might be listening to this too.
Yeah. No, of course.
You careless person, you.
And he was thinking of making similar plans as well. He wanted to look up.
How did you decide on a bicycle?
Firstly, I grew up on a mountain bike. And then, as I said, I'd been travelling elsewhere before. I went to China, which was probably the more exciting. Yeah, there's something about a bike, it means that you travel at the right speed. That means that you travel slowly enough to take in what's around you, but not so fast that you start to get, you just flip between the nicest places. As a bike, you're forced to ride through all the really crap places, and it's often the really crap places, the really hard times that produce the coolest stuff. That's the time when someone will come, be extremely nice to you. That's the time when you'll see a ridiculous wild animal, something like that. But if you're traveling by bus, it has its advantages because you get to see all the coolest stuff. But sometimes you miss some of the rubbish stuff.
Explain to us about your preparation.
Basically, what you pack depends on what you want to do. Various types of touring. One is just pure bicycle touring, which is why people have road bikes, and they take usually 4 big panniers. So those things that sort of hang off the back of there.
Exactly. Side saddles.
Yeah. So 2 at the back, 2 at the front. Maybe a frame bag, which is the one that sort of sits in the thing, and top tube bag. And those people tend to travel quite heavily because you can do. And if you're mainly traveling on sort of flat areas, you'll be absolutely fine on one of those, and you can bring the kitchen sink. And then at the other end of the scale, there are bike packers who generally are traveling off road, and they're on dirt roads, which is fantastic fun when you're in South America. And they are much more minimalist, and they have things all sort of in places where the bike balances well. So on handlebars and frame bags and very small rear panniers. And you tend to have to carry very, very little stuff. You need to do that. You need to think about absolutely everything. Everything has to have several purposes. Because traveling light means traveling happy when you're traveling off road, because everything starts to break. It's miserable. Your legs will hurt if you carry more stuff than you need. And it becomes the point where it's more comfortable to carry less stuff. And so I originally started as a tourer and carried a reasonable amount of stuff.
Okay. So your previous experience have taught you how to pack for that.
Yeah, that's true. And certainly the most important thing is what you don't need, as opposed to what you do. And I went super light with some things. I bought a bivy bag, which is just a waterproof sack that goes over a sleeping bag. And that was beautiful and liberating, where you could just sort of lay down a sleeping pad, lay down, look up at the stars, and that was fun for about a month. But then once I hit Patagonia, it rained constantly. Like anyone who's ever bivvied for any period of time, 4 days is the maximum before it will break you.
Okay.
And since then I ordered a tent. I'm much happier now.
Okay.
Sleeping bag, bivvy bag, small little stove, some clothes, probably more than I needed, but I like to stop off in sort of cities and not look like an animal.
Okay, you've packed up, you've got your sleeping bag and other things ready packed with you. Do you remember what it was like getting on the plane when you're like, okay, I'm really doing this now?
Yeah, and it's going to be a bit of disappointment, but there was no apprehension, no butterflies at all. I knew I could do it. I was just extremely pleased not to be at my desk and very excited, mostly about the fact that I wasn't going to be working for a year.
Okay.
Again, this sounds like it doesn't sound like the most positive thing, but I was.
But it's the truth.
But I didn't know what to expect. But I knew, it sounds sort of quick-headed, but I knew I could deal. I think there's a certain sort of confidence you get from being older. I think I knew it'd be fine.
First 24-hour feeling when the plane landed. Do you speak Spanish?
No, I don't.
Okay, so you're landed. Where did you land exactly?
In Ushuaia. So.
Okay, Spanish-speaking community, taxi drivers, hotel, different things like that.
Yeah.
With Spanish, how was that?
Again, my experience from being in China, where I can't even read anything, let alone speak anything, and I really tried, that I knew I would be fine. It was just a question of the embarrassment. I was embarrassed that I didn't speak Spanish. In fact, my very first words on this continent were, "I'm sorry," which is the lamest thing that you could possibly do, but it was, I'm sorry I can't speak Spanish. But I like to think that since then I've tried, and I do spend periods where I really focus on trying to get better at Spanish. But as far as the apprehension when I got off the plane, no, it feels like a very safe place. Ushuaia.
Okay.
It feels a bit like a sort of ski resort, actually, the airport. And it's just a question of, by not speaking Spanish, it's a question of what you can get out of it, and you do miss a whole swathe.
You got down there, you started to look for your bicycle. How did you end up choosing your bicycle?
I was kind of forced into it, really.
Of course. Hopefully not a good point.
No.
South America's dangerous, I was told.
True, yeah. I had a look. I heard that people exchange stuff on Facebook a lot. certainly in Argentina, and there are other sites like
Mercado.
where you can find people selling all sorts of stuff, but tend to be quite specific if you're looking for a bike, especially one that's got to be tough
Make
to
it across the
make it across the continent. And so after a while, I asked for advice. A lot of salty travellers in Ushuaia, in hostels, and I put out feelers on sort of bike touring groups. Anyone dropping off a bike in Ushuaia, nothing. And it turns out the reason for that is because I think a lot of people abandon their north-south cycling trips. They might not admit it to folks back home, but they abandon it probably in Punta Arenas or slightly sort of short of there, because there is a long, windy stretch of nothingness between Punta Arenas and Ushuaia. There are some very pretty bits around Ushuaia, but you don't want to be cycling against that wind in that massive expanse. So I think that's why that there aren't new bikes in Ushuaia. So I took a bus to Punta Arenas, where there's a big sort of tax-free haven that I'd heard about, and I'd heard that there was sort of big supermarkets and things, and other places where I might be able to find. Looked around there, they were mostly junk, but there was one really high quality bike shop. There were 3 bikes, and I chose the prettiest one.
That's not the strongest, but the prettiest one. No. Like with the bows and everything on it. Not something that's going to make you go all the way through South America.
It was a Trek Marlin 7, which is a kind of mid-range bike, a mountain bike. And it turns out that it's done the job absolutely perfectly. And it's exactly what I would choose if I were doing it again. Nothing too expensive because you don't have to worry about losing it, but something extremely strong and like well made.
When you say nothing too expensive, do you mind sharing with us what a bike like that costs?
Yeah, sure. It was only, I say only, but people who know about bikes will know the phenomenal amounts you can spend on. But it was £500.
Okay. You know, when I've spoken to people before that are doing this, they've gotten bikes for like thousands of dollars. Yeah. So give the name again of that bike.
It's a Trek Marlin 7, but any one of those standard line of Treks, like they've got beautiful geometry and they're really comfortable for travelling long distances. Plus, like aggressive enough if you want to ride off road, because there are stretches of like gnarly off road that you will find yourself on if you want to go bike packing. Okay. And it's always good also to have something that's kind of
bike packing.
Bike packing. I know exactly.
Not backpacking, but bike packing. Please note that.
It does what it says. And yeah, so you really don't need to spend the earth, and it's probably better if you don't. You just have to get the right type of bike.
So you went in, you bought your bike. Where did you actually start from?
I started from there.
Okay, you started from there. So yeah, you got on your bike.
Yeah.
Again, I'm going to keep asking these first feelings. No, you're on your bike and you're like, okay, now I'm going. Like, tell us about that.
Yeah, I was excited. I met a really good bunch of people in the first hostel I stayed at. And I almost didn't want to move because, particularly one girl. But after that, I had my bike and I had to move because otherwise...
That was your journey.
Exactly. And so the first section is all by road, incredibly windy, and nobody had told me that... In fact, it wasn't up to everyone to tell me, but I hadn't found out that the prevailing wind, like certainly down there, is north to south. And it's strong. And like wind,
you're going against the wind right now.
Wind is the number one enemy of cycling. Like it can make your life really hard. And for instance, if you're climbing a hill, you climb to the top of the hill and it will give you that energy back as you go down it. Whereas if you're cycling into the wind, it's just constantly stealing like energy and food and patience off you as you go down this road. The first, I reckon, 4 or 5 days were perhaps some of the hardest that I was there. And also, I come from sitting at a desk and doing some exercise, but I was in no means the shape of my life.
How many hours a day were you cycling? Or are you cycling? Has it changed in the process?
It has. I've got lazier.
Okay. How many hours were you cycling then? What was a day look like in the first part of your trail?
I was super keen, obviously, and I would wake up. I mean, if you're outdoors, you tend to wake up with the sun anyway. And so I reckon I would be going by 8 o'clock in the morning and then have like a few short stops in the day, maybe like no more than half an hour each. And I would cycle till 5:30 when it starts to get dark, and then put my stuff sort of down and go to sleep fairly early again. But it's amazing how your body adapts to cycling all day. And I wouldn't have thought it would be as easy as it is. You can put down, enough watts just to keep going. No one has to be a superhero. But you cover a lot more distance if you just get an average pace down and you put it down for an entire day.
Okay.
And also sometimes you just want to make the scenery go by if it's not a particularly interesting part of it. In some of the first few days when it was really windy, I think I set an all-time record for the least amount of distance I covered in an entire day, which is about 45 kilometers, and that was with extreme effort, just because just a hurricane coming the other way, like horrible wind-burned face. And that's where I met my first sort of lot of other cyclists, four guys from Suffolk, which is a county in England, and they were just absolutely priceless, really funny guys, like really sort of a great sense of humour. But I sort of met them and they looked pretty broken because this was the first time they had cycled, and they were on pure touring bikes, and they were sort of discussing sort of giving up at that point. And
hopefully they didn't. Guys, if you're out there, please tell me you didn't give up. Contact us.
They didn't. No, I met them several times later.
I didn't ask you before. Why did you decide to do it by yourself?
Anyone that's like sort of 35-ish knows that even getting your friends to turn up to the pub is almost impossible. Okay. Everyone's got commitments, and certainly no one can afford to take that sort of length of time off. Although some people have sort of expressed an interest, but I also enjoy cycling by myself. You can set your own pace. I think if I cycle with someone else, I take a bit more of a back seat, and I don't organise things, and I just turn into a useless passenger.
If you're by yourself, you have to take care of yourself.
Absolutely.
If you're with someone else, sometimes it can get into the mode of, okay, take care of me, or sometimes you're taking care of the other person.
Neither way is particularly fun. I mean, it's good to have people to talk to, as you say. No one wants to be the person who's miles in front of their friend, and no one wants to be the person that's miles behind them. Someone is always sort of confident.
Okay, so you're riding for quite a few hours during the day. Where are you sleeping?
Yeah, I sleep like a baby wherever I sleep, but I've mostly been wild camping, which is basically you cycle until about 4 p.m. and then you start to look around for decent places to camp. And sometimes they are really hard to come by, but sometimes they are everywhere. And certainly in those sort of barren stretches in sort of Chile, you only need to put your bivy bag down behind a little bump in the road and no one can see you. Animals might find you. So I kind of feel as though if no one can see you, then you're in very little danger. A lot of cyclists, also wild camp. I don't know how ethically I feel about it, because every bit of land belongs to somebody. For instance, if you're sleeping in a farmer's field, that's very obviously somebody's land, and it's a bit of an ask to just camp on someone's land, especially if you're not able to ask them or find them. But sometimes, places just look wild. As I've found later in my trips, or as I have been found in various times, nobody has cared. And if anything, everyone's been kind of supportive.
Another question. I know that in Europe there's the whole concept of hot showers. Do we have that in South America?
We certainly do, yeah.
Okay.
A lot of people are turning me on to hot showers. I've not done it yet. I know there are all these sorts of sharing things, and they're a really nice idea.
So let's do you know? Okay, let's talk a little about what it is, so that the people who are listening to us, they have.
I'm no expert, but from what I've heard, hot showers is just a community. I don't know if it's specifically for cyclists, but I think cyclists tend to be.
It started as a thing for cyclists.
Yeah, and basically people who like cyclists or like putting up cyclists, and they might have floors or rooms in their houses, an app where you contact people. You probably have a profile. You can arrange to stay with people.
Good.
Yeah, kind of hard to find it.
Well, we'll talk about how you clean yourself on that. No, but have you used any of the other apps? For example, Couchsurfing. Have you used any of them?
I'm useless at all of these. No, Couchsurfing. I set up a profile. Someone vouched for me to sort of say that I wasn't a serial killer. Then I didn't use it. The reason I don't use it is because although it's a lovely sort of human thing to do, I don't want to feel indebted to anyone. Because sometimes when you're cycling, at the end of the day, you are pretty tired, you smell pretty bad, and I feel obligated if you stay with somebody to perhaps cook for them, like the scintillating conversation, and sometimes I don't really have the energy for that.
Oh, okay, no, totally understood.
Yeah, so I'd much rather just find a hole somewhere.
Yeah, so when you're out there on the road, and okay, so we've talked about how you sleep, but for example, showering and stuff like that. What do you do? Do you sponge yourself? Do you or do you just say, hell with it? I'm by myself here. No one's gonna tell that I'm smelling.
Yeah,
give me the truth.
No, I will give you the truth. I tend to the gaps between major cities, which is where I usually end up staying in hostels. I can go maybe sort of 15, 20 days between without having sort of a proper sort of place to get clean and sort out the kit and stuff like that. And that is far too long to go without a shower, even if you didn't care about the smell, because like the hygiene is important, because you know if you get like sores or something from cycling and they get infected, then you've been all sorts of trouble.
Okay. There are certain places where it might take a day to get to the next town, or 2 days, or 3 days. And how are you working that out as far as the food goes?
First of all, wherever I find somewhere that there's food, I eat it. If there's a restaurant, then I will most definitely eat there, because you know certainly in northern South America, food is incredibly cheap to eat out, but it's expensive in Chile and Argentina, and so I would buy a lot of pasta and buy a lot of lentils, and I would cook them on a little stove. And it's really fun cooking on a stove as well. Okay. It's really kind of heartwarming to have. Not heartwarming, but yeah, it's really nice to have a hot meal at the end of the day, but not a necessity. And like sometimes I would just buy food like a 5-year-old, if you let them run loose in a supermarket. You know, I would just buy all the worst food, because it doesn't matter, because it's just calories, and like, there's no chance of getting fat when you're on a fat menu. And yeah, I spend most of my time when I'm in hostels just eating as much as I can.
Now I want to hear some highlights and some lowlights. Or maybe we do the lowlights first. Let's do the lowlights first. Like what's been, so then we can go on the higher note, because we're getting towards the end of our program.
Fine. Okay. I've had some really tough climbs, like where I have just been, between Sucre in Bolivia and Cochabamba, there is a route called Toro Toro, which is kind of infamous for having just a ridiculous number of climbs, and it was ridiculously hot. Climbing, I broke the chain because you're carrying so much stuff, just the weight of the thing put so much strain on it. And then the chain whipped round, like a link caught the derailleur and just bent the whole derailleur out. I had been struggling with like not food poisoning, that's too extreme, but like, you know, just had the general South American squirt. And so I was in like this place where I could not find any shade. So I just my bike was just on the ground, so there's nowhere to even lean it. I was trying to bend this derailleur back into the place in the absolute boiling hot sun, while taking like 5-minute breaks to just go and like, I don't know how to put that politely.
Nature calling.
Yeah, exactly. Nature calling. And at that point, this is going to sound stupid and vain, but it wasn't actually the worst point, because at that point I felt like, hey, this is a challenge. And as soon as like I framed it in the context of this is a challenge that I have to overcome, then it became exciting.
Adventure,
exactly.
This is what I was looking for.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it happens that people put that into, this is what I'm looking for. And this is a great story for a cocktail party.
Apart from the last bit, maybe. Sure. Before I left London, I bought a bike, like just for commuting, just not a great bike, but it's quite a nice one. And I left it outside Halfords in Vauxhall, chained up. It was the very first time that this bike had been out in the open, and it was gone within 15 minutes. Okay. And I was furious. But that was in England. Okay. And then as soon as I got to South America, I was pretty conscious about, it has a reputation. I was careful about where I left my bike, but the longer time went on and the more reckless I was leaving my bike everywhere, I just realised that there is an incredible, nobody even considers like stealing. Like I leave it outside restaurants where I can sort of sit and drink a coffee and watch what people are looking at my bike. And a couple of people sort of look at it out of interest. Nobody has sort of looked around to see if anyone else was looking, like tested, thought about making an offer. So, like, absolutely honest to...
And I can also imagine, as you're riding into some of the small towns, going from one place to another, the kids and the excitement, it's like, oh, El Gringo! Where's he coming from? Where is he cycling from? Like, towards the end, we're definitely going towards the end. We have to wind down. But give us a story like that, or some other highlight.
No, kids
you become the hero of the town.
Oh, I'm always the hero. Always a lot of kids really excited to see sort of my bike. They run along next to it, and if you catch anyone on a bike at any point, they will always try and stay with you. like not sort of cycle along with you, but just to test whether they think they can keep the pace. And I automatically up the pace to see if I can drop.
Oh, I can see this.
And no one's going to stay.
Well, thank you for coming in today. Thank you for choosing to do this in your life, to bicycle ride from the south all the way to the north, because otherwise I wouldn't have had this opportunity to talk to you in this interview. And good luck, because you're 3/4 of the way, right?
Yeah, nearly there.
Yeah, 3/4 of the way.
Maybe 3 months more, but that keeps extending. But geographically, very close.
Thank you for listening, and please don't forget to subscribe so you get all our upcoming shows. I'd like to give a special shout out and thanks to our editor, Marshall Donnelly. I'd also like to invite you to share not only this podcast, but the Facebook page where we have the written stories with others. Please send all your comments to elcafecitotraveltalks@gmail.com. Look forward to hearing from you. So when all this craziness ends and things get back to normal, we look forward to sharing with you here in Cuenca, Ecuador, the El Cafecito, both the hostel and the cafe. All the best for now. Please stay safe.